So the demo here is going to be like how to use the metadata separation architecture that you saw so far to kind of make Hasura run on some kind of a limited Postgres instance. Like it could be a completely read-only Postgres instance, like a read replica, or something which is running in backup mode because of some kind of a log recovery or so on. But it could also be running Hasura with a database user who has like very few privileges. Like maybe the database user can only read from few tables. And so far, there was no way for you to run Hasura over that because there has to be a metadata store, right? And so that means there are like write permissions which are involved in making Hasura run over an existing Postgres database. But let's see what will happen now, right? So I have my terminal here, and if we look at Docker, I don't have any containers running, so I'll quickly run a Postgres container. So that's just starting Postgres on port 6432. There you go. So I want to run Hasura over this database, right? So before I do that, let me just show you some SQLs that I'm going to execute to A, populate a table, and B, I will also create a user who's like very less privileged. Like so you can see the three commands, just three commands that I'll use to create the user. The first is just create user with this password. The second is usage on schema, which you require to do anything on that schema. And the third, which is the most relevant part here, which is that it only has select privileges on the public schema, right? So let me quickly go and create that. So I already exported this, so I can just import the script. There you go. So I have created these things. That means I have this user, which means that if I now run my Hasura service on this Postgres instance, and I can do that using Docker, and I've already set up the database URL to match this user, which is Hasura user and Hasura user. And the GraphQL engine version, as you can see, is the latest version, which is 1.3.2. So what will happen if we do this? I don't see my service here. That means it might have exited as it shows here. So let me do Docker logs, right? So it will give me a permission denied for database Postgres, and it could not, and it got this error while trying to execute this create schema statement, right? So as expected, Hasura did not start with this Hasura user, database user, right? So what can happen next? As you can imagine, we can actually separate the metadata storage to a completely different Postgres, maybe spawn a new Postgres instance with for just the metadata part, which you can control and have like more access to. So I'm going to do that now. So I have this another Docker service command, which is going to start Postgres now in port 7432. The previous one was in 6432. And I will first spawn this. So now I have two Postgres instances, one in 6432, the other in 7432. And I will also run my Hasura with this preview build, which is what will be released shortly as version 1.4. And the important bit to see here is that I'm giving two URLs now, two environment variables. The first one is called metadata database URL, which is pointing to ports, which is pointing to the Postgres service, which is running on 7432. And this is the default admin password, right? Postgres password. And the other database URL is my regular database URL, which was the Hasura user on the database at port 6432, right? So I'm going to run this now. So this runs successfully. Let's confirm that. So it says that the server has started, which means that if I have a thing running here, a local console running here, and there you go. So Hasura is starting. I can see the table that I created before, so I can track it as well. And if I come back here, I have my query here, and if I run it, I can run it as well. So I ran Hasura with almost like a minimal privileged user, a user who could only do selects on a table. And this kind of gives you a sense of like what all things you can do with the Postgres user, right? And the Postgres database to which you are pointing Hasura to. It could be a read replica. You could point it with a very different user, and so on and so forth. So that was the first. Yes, actually that was my demo.